Welcome to the explainer that's going to absolutely transform biostatistics from your biggest source of anxiety into a totally predictable, reliable source of points on your clinical board exams. I am so glad you're here. Look, if you've ever stared at a p-value or a confidence interval and just felt your stomach drop, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're breaking down the absolute highest yield concepts for pharmacy, medicine, nursing, and allied health board exams. But hey, before we tackle a single number, let's do a quick pattern interrupt to just reset your mindset. Let's actually do this together right now. Take one slow, deep breath in through your nose, hold it gently for a count of 2, and exhale slowly through your mouth. Now, just name one thing you're grateful for today. The honest truth is, your board exam prep doesn't reward cramming or perfection. It rewards discipline, consistency, and a lot of courage. And you know what? You've already done the hard part just by showing up. So why does all this matter? Well, every single clinical decision you make is, at its core, really just a bet on probability. Biostatistics is simply the language that lets us read the evidence honestly. It's crucial because it lets you see right past all that flashy drug marketing to understand the true clinical benefit. It empowers you to give your real-world patients honest, understandable risk information. And let's be real, these are highly learnable, highly scoreable points for your exams. All right, here's our roadmap for the 5 core rules we're mastering today. We're going to hit p-values and the null hypothesis, cracking confidence intervals, difference versus ratio data, type 1 and type 2 errors, and finally, relative risk in action. Okay, section 1, foundations, p-values, and the null. Before you can even begin to interpret a complex study, you absolutely have to understand what the researchers are actually trying to prove and the threshold they're using to prove it. Everything, and I mean everything, begins with the null hypothesis, or H0. You can think of this as the incredibly boring, deeply skeptical starting assumption that there's absolutely no difference between the groups being compared. It basically assumes the shiny new drug works no better than a sugar pill, or that 2 treatments are exactly identical. Just remember, medical research is essentially one big attempt to gather enough hard clinical evidence to reject this super skeptical, boring baseline assumption. We never technically prove the null true, we just try our hardest to reject it. Now, to actually reject that null hypothesis, we need 2 critical numbers, alpha and the p-value. Alpha is simply the threshold of error we're willing to accept before the study even gets off the ground. It's usually set at 0.05, which just means we're okay with a 5% maximum chance of falsely declaring a difference that isn't really there. The p-value, on the other hand, is the actual probability of seeing your study's specific results if the null hypothesis were entirely true. So, the absolute crucial takeaway here is this decision rule. If your p-value is less than your alpha threshold, boom, you reject the null hypothesis and declare statistical significance. And here is your first essential memory anchor. Repeat this to yourself. Alpha is the line, and the p-value is where you land. If your p-value lands below that alpha line, say you get a p-value of 0.03 against an alpha of 0.05, you've got a statistically significant result. But quick side note, always remember that statistical significance does not automatically mean clinical importance. A tiny, practically meaningless real-world benefit can totally be statistically significant if the study is just massive enough. Moving right along, section 2, cracking confidence intervals. So while a p-value really just gives you a basic yes or no on whether something is statistically significant, a confidence interval, or CI, gives you a whole range of plausible values for the true effect. A 95% confidence interval basically means that if we repeated the exact same study over and over again, countless times, about 95% of those intervals we produced would successfully capture the true population value. It's a total game changer because it tells you 2 things at once. First, whether the result is statistically significant, and second, exactly how precise the estimate really is. Now, when it comes to precision, here is the memory anchor you need to just burn into your brain right now. Narrow means you nailed it. Wide means it's wobbly. Precision is all about how tightly your data pins down the actual answer. If you're looking at a narrow interval, you've got high precision, which is usually the result of a really large, well-designed study. But if that interval is wide, your data is wobbly, meaning the true value could honestly be bouncing around between a lot of different things. You also have to keep in mind the mathematical trade-off between alpha and confidence. It's a simple formula. Confidence level equals 1 minus alpha. So if your alpha is 0.05, your CI is 95%. But if you demand a much higher confidence level, like say 99%, it mathematically guarantees a wider, much less precise interval. Basically, you become way more certain that you've captured the true value somewhere in there, but you are absolutely sacrificing precision to do it. It's always a trade-off. All right, let's jump to section 3, statistical significance using confidence intervals. Okay, listen up, because we've just reached one of the absolute highest yield skills on your entire exam. Seriously, if you master this next concept, you're going to consistently grab some incredibly easy points. We're going to look at how to judge statistical significance using just a confidence interval, without even needing a p-value. To pull this off, you simply look at where the confidence interval falls. But first, you have to ask yourself a crucial question to find your magic number. Are you dealing with difference data or ratio data? See, difference data comes from subtraction. Think absolute risk reduction. And with subtraction, no difference is obviously zero. Ratio data, on the other hand, comes from division, like relative risk or an odds ratio. And since any number divided by itself is 1, for ratio data, no difference is exactly 1.
So, put simply, if you're looking at difference data, the result is only statistically significant if the interval does not include 0, period. For example, if a new drug reduces heart attacks and the absolute risk reduction gives you a confidence interval of 0.01 to 0.07, well, that entire interval sits comfortably above 0. It completely avoids it. Therefore, you've got a statistically significant result on your hands.
Seriously, write this down or repeat it out loud right now. Difference data crosses 0, ratio data crosses 1. It is that simple. If the confidence interval crosses its respective magic number, then the result actively includes the possibility of a total no effect. And if no effect is literally sitting inside your interval, well, your result is not statistically significant. So let's do a quick board-style check. When you encounter a practice question about relative risk on your exams, I want you to literally stop and pause. Force yourself to actively retrieve the correct magic number in your head before you even glance at the multiple choice options. Think about it. Relative risk is ratio data. Ratio means division. Therefore, you absolutely must compare that confidence interval to the number 1, not 0. If it crosses 1, it's not significant. Simple as that. Let's move on to Section 4, Type 1 and Type 2 errors. Now, because we rely so heavily on probabilities and alpha thresholds, whenever we try to make a simple yes or no decision about the null hypothesis, two kinds of errors are just mathematically inevitable over time. This 2x2 decision matrix perfectly breaks down these common mistakes. Let's say the null hypothesis is actually true in the real world, but our study data misleadingly leads us to reject it. Boom, we've just committed a type 1 error, a false positive. On the flip side, what if the null is false in reality, meaning there really is a true meaningful difference out there, but our study completely fails to detect it and we accept the null? That right there is a type 2 error, or a false negative.
Okay, to make this stick forever, I want you to think of the boy who cried wolf analogy. A type I error is exactly like when you cry wolf, but there really isn't one. You thought there was a difference, but you were completely wrong. A type 2 error, however, is when you just totally ignore a real wolf. You literally missed a real existing difference. Use the first letters to help you remember. A type I error is falsely inventing an effect. A type 2 error is ignoring a real one.
And finally, Section 5, Relative Risk in Action.
Let's just tie everything we've talked about today together with a real-world clinical scenario involving relative risk. Because honestly, this is exactly how you're going to apply these concepts, both on your exams and when you're actually practicing medicine. Relative risk, or RR, compares the risk of an event happening in the treatment group directly to the risk in the control group. And it does this using division. Remember our magic number for division? Yep, it's 1. If the relative risk equals 1, there is 0 difference. If it's less than 1, the treatment successfully lowered the risk. And if it's greater than 1, well, that means the treatment actually caused more events, which is usually not what you want. Visually contrasting these results from a massive real-world heart failure study makes the math behind this feel incredibly intuitive. In this particular study, researchers wanted to see if the beta blocker metoprolol actually slowed down heart failure progression. Out of 5,123 patients taking metoprolol, 823 had an event. That comes out to a 16% risk. Now, in the placebo control group, 1,397 out of 4,988 patients had an event. That is a much higher 28% risk. So to find the relative risk, we literally just divide the treatment risk by the control risk. By dividing 0.16 by 0.28, we get a relative risk of 0.57. And because 0.57 is sitting well below our magic number of 1, this proves the drug genuinely statistically reduces the risk of heart failure progression compared to taking a placebo. As you keep pushing through your board prep, please remember these anchors. Narrow means you nailed it. Difference data crosses 0. Ratio data crosses 1. But beyond the exam room, I really want you to always ask yourself this. If a number on a page doesn't translate to an understandable risk for the extremely real human patient sitting right in front of you, what is it really worth? Use this newfound biostats confidence not just to ace your boards, but to communicate honestly, clearly, and compassionately with your future patients. Can you imagine the difference that's going to make? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy studying.